Here goes. Through the windows. Got the video?
Yep.
And he's gonna hit us next. Oh, he's hitting us. Got the video?
Yep.
And
Oh my god, we did that. Oh. Oh my god.
This new study lifts the lid on what seems to be a very disturbing problem in the French armed forces. It talks about former military personnel who have gone on to join terror groups in areas like Iraq and Syria.
The centre identified around 30 former French soldiers who had been in Syria or Iraq, or who had taken part in attacks in France. After training for several months, sometimes years, these ex-soldiers made the choice to abandon the French flag and fight instead under the banner of a terrorist group.
Now, it talks about the numbers. It says around 30 have been radicalised in the last few years. While that number doesn't seem to be huge, it does point to a very worrying problem.
Russian-backed government forces have intensified their bombing campaign, which includes airstrikes, dropping barrel bombs and shelling the town of Ma'arat al-Nu'man in southern Idlib. Syrians living there say the attacks are indiscriminate, with hospitals, markets and homes targeted. Here, rescue workers are struggling to save a young girl stuck under the rubble of a home in Ma'arat al-Nu'man. The town in northwest Syria is seeing some of the heaviest attacks in the almost 9-year war. Public anger against the offensive spilled onto the streets on Friday. Hundreds in Idlib protested what they called the neglect of their plight by the international community. They also called for a swift halt to the bombardment.
Two, one, and lift off. The rise of Starliner.
To the stars and beyond. NASA's Atlas V rocket successfully launched just a little before sunrise on Friday from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The rocket was carrying the newly built Starliner capsule, meant to transport astronauts back and forth from space one day. The Starliner was unmanned and carried on board a life-size mannequin nicknamed Rosie. But things didn't quite go according to plan.
What ended up happening is the spacecraft tried to maintain a very precise control that it normally wouldn't have tried to maintain, and it burned a lot of prop in that part of the flight. And when that prop got burnt, it looked like we weren't going to be able to go ahead and rendezvous with the International Space Station.
The sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 project are included in a wide-ranging US defence spending bill. President Trump signed that legislation into law at a ceremony held at Andrews Air Force Base just outside Washington.
So it's now my honor to sign the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act into law.
The sanctions target companies involved in the almost €10 billion project to double the pipeline capacity carrying Russian natural gas to Europe's leading economy, Germany. Most of that pipeline has been completed. Allseas, the company building the unfinished section through Danish territorial waters, announced it was halting its work in anticipation of the new law. Washington had made it clear in advance that non-compliance would have consequences.
North Korea has criticized the U.S. for taking issue with its human rights record. Pyongyang state-run news agency KCNA on Saturday warned that Washington's criticism of its human rights record amounts to a political provocation against Pyongyang that would only aggravate the already tense situation on the Korean peninsula. This comes after the UN General Assembly on Wednesday condemned North Korea's long-standing and ongoing violations of human rights in an annual resolution sponsored by dozens of countries, including the U.S. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department on Friday placed North Korea along with 8 other countries on its special watch list for severe violations of religious freedom. 2019 marks the 18th year in a row that North Korea has been on the special watch list.
Divisions between unions as the strikes in France continue. An even bigger issue at the moment, however, seems to be the cracks within unions as workers break ranks with their leaders' wishes. The CFDT workforce on Friday announced they would continue to strike throughout the Christmas holidays, ignoring calls from their leadership for a break during the festive period after minor concessions on the government's behalf.
Until January, at a time of immense importance for the dignity of future pensioners, CFDT rail workers will continue to strike.
Currently, only the UNSA union are calling to suspend the strike, but their demands could be ignored. UNSA, the second biggest union within France's state-owned railway company, the SNCF. They gathered almost 24% of the vote at the last elections, but represent less than 10% of all train drivers and ticket inspectors.
Scott Morrison is due to land back in Sydney tonight as he faces criticism over the timing of his Hawaiian holiday. The acting Prime Minister, Michael McCormack, fronted the media today and admitted the bushfires have fuelled concerns over climate change.
A call for reinforcements answered by Canada. 30 firefighters welcomed to Sydney.
We're here to help in any way we can.
By the Emergency Management Minister.
Thanks for coming.
As he announces more money for those worst hit by fires in the Blue Mountains, Lithgow and Singleton in New South Wales, with more to come for South Australia.
We have initiated payments to help those that have been impacted immediately.
While the Prime Minister makes his way back to Sydney after declaring yesterday morning that he'd cut short his Hawaiian holiday because of the escalating bushfire crisis.
A suicide bomber caught on a security camera moments before killing 9 reporters. In Afghanistan, journalists are often caught in the crossfire or even targeted.
We have witnessed lots of these kind of complicated attacks that journalists have been killed.
Sultan Faizi runs a news agency that spans the war-torn nation. He makes hard decisions daily about sending reporters into what is potentially harm's way.
Not only it's the Taliban, but it's also sometimes some warlords and some powerful figures. They try to manipulate our activities in Afghanistan in terms of
military helicopters interrupting an interview is routine and the least of a reporter's worries here.
They have come to our terms to address our concerns.
Baltimore City's police commissioner announced 3 surveillance planes will be flying over Baltimore again in a new pilot program starting in May to test whether they can cut down on violence. They will take video of 90% of the city. During the pilot program, there will be no live streaming.
See that? That's all you see. I can't tell who that is.
The last time the planes flew was 2016 when they were launched in secret. Then, as now, Texas philanthropists will cover the cost of the program at no taxpayer expense.
I'm obviously well aware of the plane's controversial history and the resistance it encountered here in Baltimore.
The commissioner said he has doubts the planes will actually cut crime. They will only be used to help with murder, shooting, and carjacking cases for now.